Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. We are thrilled that you are here today, connecting with one of the new teachers in the Ashtanga Yoga lineage. So I've been told by email and comments that you would like to hear from some of the newer teachers and newer practitioners of Ashtanga Yoga. So today we have a very, very lovely young man named Sam Silversides. He's been a student of yoga since 2010. And after practicing 5 years, he met Richard Freeman and Mary Taylor and dove into the world of Ashtanga Yoga, taking their teacher training and practicing with them in their intensives and workshops, and has taken Ty Landrum, who's also a student of Richard and Mary's, as his mentor and good friend, and has assisted him on many trainings. And Sam is going to be teaching at Purple Valley Retreat Center in India for the month of July, and you can sign up to practice with him there. So today we're diving into his story of how he started Ashtanga Yoga and also what he's up to these days. Some of the benefits, some of his funny stories. I think you're going to love it. He is just a really, really wonderful person, and I enjoy spending time with him, so I'm sure you'll enjoy spending time with him too. So let's jump in. Hey, hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony, and today Russell Case is here.
You know, I think I've been wearing this shirt for too long.
You should probably shower and do some laundry.
It's just this winter, sweetie.
It's
We've snowed 4 inches this morning. But I tried to dress up for the show because I knew we were going to be interviewing the infamous Samuel Silversides. And I wore my Canadian tuxedo.
That's right. We have another Canadian on the show today.
He says, no, I'm not wearing this is not a tuxedo. The black and the red and black is, the lumberjack.
Lumberjack.
He says, no, what'd you say? It says jeans jacket is the Canadian tuxedo.
Oh, yeah, jean jacket.
Jean on jean. A jean jacket on jeans is generally considered the Manitoba Millionaire or the Canadian tuxedo. Yeah.
I love it.
Does it have to be acid wash?
No. It should be faded, raw.
Faded. Yeah, all right.
Yeah. Selvage denim, ideally. Yeah.
The Manitoba Millionaire. I've never heard that.
But
that's
your
the new one, eh? You got
your
that.
families. We were just discussing before the show started. Harmony and I both, our families kind of came out of Saskatchewan, but my family actually came out of Pickering and Brooke, Ontario. Do you know those places? Have you heard of them?
I've heard of Pickering. I don't.
Oh, Pickering.
No one's heard of them.
Pickering,
Yeah,
small towns in the 1800s of Ontario. My great uncle is still there, Uncle Alan. He's 101. And you're not 100. You're much younger. Are you from Ontario? Is that where you're from? Toronto born?
I've been told, but yes, 36 years of age at this point.
Not with a face that fresh. There's nothing old.
You know who you remind me of, actually?
36.
Tom Holland, right?
Hey, I'll take that. I'll take it.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
You're like total Spider-Man.
I mean, he is legitimately, I think, like 26 years old, but
I think that's you. I think
don't know.
26, actually.
He's a bit cuter than
Batman.
Tom. I'd say
I'm a bit
more Andrew
brooding,
Garfield than Tom Holland.
No.
Long and spidery.
I mean, the age is more appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah. 36.
That's hard to believe.
Good God.
You have a very young energy.
Yeah.
Old soul, young energy.
Likewise.
Oh, no one says that
Yeah.
about me anymore.
Well, I wasn't
So
really talking about you.
Yeah.
why I love Canada. Why did you grow up in Ontario then? Why'd you do that?
Born in a city named Toronto, and so that's kind of how it happened.
Big city boy.
City
Yeah,
boy.
Hmm?
city slicker,
Wow.
right
Big
downtown
city.
epicenter, Broadview and Danforth, Prince
Really?
Edward Viaduct. Yeah.
Did they
Wow,
put
not even a
you
suburb,
did
like right
they
in the middle.
did they put you on those what do you call those
Harnesses.
harnesses with the leash to keep you from going across the road?
Those weren't invented when
I
he was a
didn't.
kid
No, but
yet.
he would have
I
needed it.
was I was jaywalking before I could walk, so I actually didn't need one of those leashes, but I did used to have something my mother affectionately referred to as idiot string when I was a
Oh,
child. Do you
what
know
is
what
You were
those
that?
are?
tied to the apron strings. That's what they'd say. I'm still
No, no,
tied
no.
to my mother's apron
No, what
strings.
are idiot
Oh, I didn't know
strings?
that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, yeah.
Idiot strings, maybe it's more of like an East thing, but when the children have their mittens, during the half a year we spend
Yes.
in the snow, you
More.
have the little strings that attaches the mittens to the
Hmm.
sleeve of the jacket. Those
Yeah.
were idiot strings. So I mean that was a
Yeah.
sort of,
I'm
leash
I'm
protective
so
measure.
old. We had the mittens that had the strings that attached to the other mitten.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And
No
you
way.
You could tie them
no,
to
them anywhere. You would put the mitten on your hand and the string would loop through one arm and all the way out the other arm to the other mitten
not gonna lose that.
so that it was always like in
Engineering
your
marvel, isn't it?
jacket, ready to go.
I love that.
So
That's brilliant.
you come up with something like that when it's a matter of life or death. You have
If you have your mittens or
mitten.
not.
Because if you don't, then if you lose a mitten, then you're gonna lose a finger, or at least the tips of the finger. Have you ever
Yeah.
lost a tip of your tip of anything?
Enough.
You and I have something in common. We both went to an arts high school for studio arts.
I love it. Here it comes. The digging comes.
I
The
was
digging
not
comes.
aware that you were a studio artist. Did you use your hands?
Actually, well, I used my body more in the sense of I was studying theater during high school.
Mhm.
But previous to that, I really was into drawing most of my life as a child. And I did art classes at the Art Gallery of Ontario and things like that, printmaking, animation. So I did use my hands a lot, or right hand, I guess.
Yeah.
um, wasn't ambidextrous. But yeah, that was really fun. I really loved the visual arts. And then in university, I went back to visual arts, and that's where the studio arts degree comes from. They kind of changed it from fine arts to studio arts. Sounds a little more modern, a
Oh,
little
right. Yeah,
contemporary,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Basically, same difference.
Yeah.
Were you doing drawing then or photography or what kind of arts were you doing?
I did drawing and photography. I liked black and white photography. I never made it to color photography. Of course, there was some digital photography as well. I'm talking about analog, which is like kind of crazy, of course. And yeah, drawing. I love drawing. I think that was kind of my favorite medium, really. Yeah.
I think it's like, not to kind of get too wonky into our
Get
field,
in
but
there.
you would argue against fine art if your bias was against, say, the stratification of hierarchies in art. And say, if you wanted to explode the difference between low and high art, pop
Hmm.
art, and fine art, then you would get rid of the
Hmm.
term and you would use studio. Because, post-war,
Oh,
people
yeah.
aren't precious about sitting at the easel, with their maul sticks and their wrist painting. They're like just coming at it from comic books, Roy Lichtenstein and
Mm,
pop, and say there's no low art. You can't call it low art. It's art. Art, it's people making art.
Hmm.
So
mm,
fine art is going to
mm.
get thrown the fuck out right away.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you're bringing attention to that because I didn't even think about it so closely.
It just
Yeah.
sounds more modern. It sounds
Yeah.
like you're doing something.
And to be fair to the program, this was at the University of Guelph, and at the undergraduate level, the kind of pinnacle through your, trajectory was specialized studio. And this would be like a third or a fourth year class where you actually were given a studio space. And
Nice.
yeah, I shared one with a colleague who was an incredible painter. He was doing watercolors at that time. Really cool stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. So from
Yeah.
here,
Well, I just want to ask one. I just want to. I know you want to get us a little bit further
yeah.
into the conversation, but I
I
just
know.
think the first time I met Sam, I was just
Art, right? We got to let him
so.
go for it. Yeah.
I was so physically attracted to him that I'm sort of stunned that your theater career didn't explode because you just radiate charisma. And so, like, you're in high school studying theater. Why didn't you get an agent and like move to New York, move to Hollywood, and just like go for that? Why are you screwing
You
around
could have been
with
Tom
drawing?
Holland.
Yeah,
You could have
why?
been
You're
Spider-Man.
10 years older than him. You could have had
Backflip.
that job, right?
Yeah, I see it. I
No.
see it for you.
I mean, he lights up the screen.
You know, I think I'm red as a tomato right now. I did have an agent, okay, in high school. I did do a little bit of work. That's
Wow.
why I have an IMDb. You may have checked my credit there.
I
Gay
did
kid.
not. Oh my goodness. I would never have thought to have done that.
Well, when you guys listed it in your form, I'm like, well, actually,
yeah.
I do have an IMDb link with one credit on it.
Sam
So I did.
Silversides is too made up as a name. You
I
were in
know it's
Queer
really
as
funny.
Folk? You were in that?
I was in the American version, right? There was a UK version, and then there was I guess a Canadian version.
It's amazing.
That
So you got onto that
doesn't. But I had a very
show.
small. I had a very small role, Russell. I think I came into a comic book shop to buy the latest edition of this gay comic book, and I
Yeah.
kind of gushed over the comic book. Speaking of comic books, and then I left. You know.
Wow.
But I mean, back in 2000, whatever that was, 3 or something, pretty decent scratch. You know, got a
Was it
home
a
theater system in a box with that
wow.
paycheck.
Amazing.
Was playing gay a stretch for you?
People often consider me to be gay. So that's, you know, I guess not a stretch in that sense, you know.
I know the
Apparently it happened to
feeling.
my grandfather. Yeah, you get that too?
Yeah, I do.
I guess
Often.
any guy, I have to be honest with you, maybe this is really outdated, but it seems like if you're into arts, you're kind of assumed to be gay.
Yeah. And I have a funny voice. So,
I love your
people
voice.
thank you so much for saying that. I think
I really do.
it's
Don't you love it? We love it,
it's
right?
the Ontario
The
piece of
Ontario,
me. Yeah.
the Canadian.
Yeah, that's what it
Yeah, it's
is.
that Ottawa Valley coming out, something. Yeah.
Ottawa Valley. Yeah, because I don't recognize my parents' accent at all. They sound really weird to me. I don't feel like I sound like them at all.
They're very American.
Dad's
Mm,
Detroit, mom's got that kind of Illinois country farm,
true.
hick thing going. Her maiden name is Hick. So
Can I say one thing about Chicago?
Yeah.
you want
Are
to
you
talk about
guys gonna?
Chicago now?
No, are you
I
guys
would
gonna
love
come
to talk about Chicago.
to Chicago at length? Because I've only been there like 3 times. But Richard and Mary are coming in June. They're going to be there for
Oh,
4 days.
oh
Super
We
wow.
cheap
should
for 8
meet.
workshops. I think we should do it.
We
I'm
should
already
meet
signed up.
there. Yeah.
Amazing. In Chicago.
Yoga View, yeah, is the name
Oh,
of the
Wow.
studio.
Yoga View.
beautiful.
That's
Something to
fabulous.
look up.
We should.
Putting it out there. PSA.
Yeah, we're here to plug you though.
Yeah.
So you have an agent, you're in Queer as Folk, but then you don't keep going in that direction.
When I got to university, I switched back into visual arts. So I kind of left the theater
Mm.
and I did do performance art, you know, which I felt like I was well suited for given the theater
Mhm.
background. And yeah, you know, it's funny. Like when I came out to Montreal in like 2010, I think even like by 2011, 2012, I was trying my hand at that again. I got some like headshots done. I knew
Yeah.
there's a really great photographer here in Montreal named Richmond Lamb who like took some photos of me, and you should have seen me back then. I should send them to you, but like I had the Johnny Bravo pompadour, okay, like straight up vertical wave. I had the blow dryer.
Wow.
I had the Kent comb from England. Like it was really legit.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like weird, kind of rockabilly vibe a little bit. And
Fabulous.
I've heard that a lot. I even heard that recently from this German author, this wonderful author, Jenny Erpenbeck. She told me I should be an actor too, you know, basically what
Yes.
you guys are saying. But I guess it was kind of one of those like crossroads moments where I was like getting more and more into yoga, and I'd done a teacher training. I'd already begun like, you know, beginning to teach and teaching for free to try to cut my teeth. And I suppose there was this point where another person in my life was saying, hey, you know, you could do this, you could really be very successful. And I just said, I want to do yoga. And it's weird. Like, it's not like I'm so altruistic or amazing. I just felt like there are things, as I'm sure you both know, about that world that are like quite intense and, kind of depleting and a bit
Yeah.
draining. Like, I mean, I love cinema and I love art. But sometimes working in that industry is pretty tough, like
Yeah.
maybe similar to us working in yoga, right? You get into it, you love it, and then it becomes this thing.
Highly competitive.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Although I think like the newest generation, and I really love what you both are doing in harmony, what you're doing with your podcast, and helping out the community, the greater yoga community. And I really love that, and I feel like that's the best way to move forward. It's just like to be collaborative, to work with the people who are already here. Let's not be so competitive with one another. Let's not do this zero sum game stuff, because
Totally.
that's kind of that's old.
Yeah, that's last decade.
Yeah,
We're moving
'cause
forward.
like this is crazy. Like I took a yoga class with Krishnamacharya's daughter
Wow.
last night at 11 p.m. The class ended around 12:30 a.m. So I'm a little bit
Oh my
whacked out.
gosh. Like online?
But yep, he
Wow.
was in Bangalore. But she said this herself. I was asking her about her father and her father's teacher, her father's guru, and she kind of spun it out into this thing about the times and how strict things were back then and how strict her father was with her, but how lenient she is now with students
Mm.
today, and people showing up 50 minutes early. She doesn't care. She's happy somebody's showing up,
Yeah.
It just made me think right then when you're saying that, like you said, that was last year, that was last decade. Let's adapt.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. What an interesting experience to have practicing with her. What kind of yoga is she teaching?
She's teaching vinyasa yoga
Really? Like a
and
like a
pranayama.
really like an offshoot of Ashtanga kind of.
Did you guys ever look up that Krishnamacharya life-saving sequence? Do you
Life
remember when that
savers.
came out?
No.
Like when Grimley posted that? Do you guys remember Grimley's blog back in the day?
Yes, yes. I know this
Right?
one. Hmm.
Okay, so at one point he posted this, and I don't know which Indian yoga school actually created the diagrams and generated this document that gave you the sequence. But ultimately, it was about like maybe a 20-minute, asana practice, really light, but yeah, really simple. Like we did Sarvangasana toward the end. We did like these interesting like Tadasana variations, really nice. And it was all like breath centered. She was quite
Yeah.
adamant about the focus on the breathing
Yeah.
and slow breathing and slow movements.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really, really cool.
Neat.
It's great that she's doing vinyasa yoga and like little bits of pranayama. It
Yeah.
reminded me of Richard and Mary's approach. I went to their Anatomy of Pranayama intensive last October in Boulder,
Yeah.
and they were really talking about like just simple pranayama, just a few rounds. Like doesn't
Hmm.
have to be much. Don't have to like blow the system.
Yeah.
And with Shubha, with Sri Shubha, I don't actually know what her family's name is now because I believe she has her husband's name, but it was the same thing. So it was really cool to see that echoing each other or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Can I ask about your first interest in yoga? I think you mentioned maybe a class in Montreal. Were you at Joanne and Darby's place?
Actually, I was. Those were my first Ashtanga teachers, and I believe they're at Purple Valley right now.
Oh
Which is
yeah.
really crazy. Yeah, in
They
Goa. Yeah,
moved
yeah.
to Costa Rica, right? They're
I
living
believe
there
they
now
did. Yeah,
pretty much
yeah.
full
I don't
time.
actually.
Okay.
I lost contact a little bit.
Okay.
I would have guessed that he would be back because I'm actually covering a Mysore program that was passed along by him and Joanne to one of his long-term students, Yael Witz.
Yeah.
We knew Joanne and Darby really well. I
Yeah.
mean, Joanne was a fixture when we were there because she lived across the street from the Shala. She'd have people over for
What year
sandwiches.
was this, Russell?
2003 to 2008. That
Yeah, she lived there for
period.
5 years
She
straight,
lived there,
basically.
and so we get to know her
Vintage.
kid. Yeah. But Darby was also interesting to me. I felt a lot of affinity for Darby.
He's a beloved character.
Yeah, I practiced next to Joanne every day for for at least a couple of trips. I practiced next to Darby. I was like, oh, we have a lot of similar, like we have similar advantages and similar disadvantages. And I was like, oh, we're a little bit clones.
Same way, you and
Yeah,
Darby. I
built
feel
the
like.
same
Yeah.
way, hip swiveling, light. And I was like, oh, this is
Interesting.
interesting. Not much of a back
Felt.
bend, svelte, you know. Yeah, it was what was your when you the first day you walked into the room and you encountered it, like what was that like for you? Why did it
What year was that even?
Well, if I'm not
what was it?
mistaken.
2012. And they had a pretty rockin' Mysore program going at that time, I think.
Yeah, so I'm in the location that I think, maybe not originally started, but he opened a location in the Belgo building in downtown Montreal, Rue Saint Catherine. And then he left that program in like the 2000 aughts, like maybe 2009, 2008, something like that. And then they moved into an old police precinct. We had
Right.
beautiful stonework on the building. I mean, it was kind of wild, right downtown by the Concordia campus. And that was the first place. That was the first time I walked into a Mysore room. And the experience, you have to understand that I have a modern yoga experience that, like, I find people who are a little bit older than me, fellow co-practitioners, can't necessarily relate to because I just didn't come up that way with the
Mhm.
practice. And I started in like hot yoga studios with mirrors and radiant heat
Right.
panels and a certain like watered down version of yoga.
Yeah.
And so coming into the Mysore room was just like another world,
Mm.
and
Yeah, that's kind of mind blowing, right? You're like, what
yeah,
is going
yeah.
on here?
Who's leading these people? Are they all possessed? Like
Yeah,
what's
what are
going
they
on? Yeah,
doing?
yeah, yeah.
And where are the mirrors?
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously the mirrors definitely. I think there might be more negatives than positives, but
There are.
they
But
were, yeah, they were interesting for auto alignment or auto adjustments or
Mhm.
something. Let's say,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
because you're given this like uncanny ability to see angles of your body that you wouldn't normally
Yeah.
be able to. Certainly, that was interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of mirrors, we could talk about mirrors a little bit
Let's talk about the
because,
mirror of yoga. Yeah.
well,
Mm.
I mean,
Look into the
that was
mirror.
that was one thing, like, because when I started practicing, mirrors weren't, I mean, there wasn't hot yoga. Bikram wasn't really a thing in Canada yet. Hot yoga wasn't a thing in Canada really yet. And
When was
so
this?
in 2001, 2, so we just, it was just like we were doing vinyasa or rocket or hatha.
Already by then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Hatha
Yeah.
for sure.
Ashtanga, like, but it was all based on Ashtanga for the most part, except hatha, which was more Shivananda style. But coming from a ballet background, you have mirrors all the time for exactly those reasons, because you're always looking outside of yourself and making adjustments, right? You can see, oh, my leg needs to go higher. Oh, it's not at the right angle. Oh, I need to lift up my torso. I need to, right? So you're always looking at yourself to make those external adjustments to your body.
Mhm. Get
And
that
so,
perfect
yeah,
line.
right, to get the perfect alignment. And so, in a way, they're super helpful because you're continually able to reference what you look like outside yourself. But in a way, it's also very traumatic and traumatizing because
Yeah, that's
you're
what I heard. Yeah.
always looking at yourself
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
you're
And
always
yeah,
criticizing yourself too, because you're looking for the faults, right? You're not looking
frequently.
like, oh, I'm doing that really good. You're always looking at, like, how can I make this better? What's wrong? And so it was very
It's
interesting.
self-congratulatory.
Yeah, right. You're not really like, yeah, I look amazing. um,
From time to time.
from time to time, yeah.
Little nitro boost for the ego. It doesn't hurt,
Yeah. But that's also just the opposite of like, I'm not good enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like the exact same pattern, just like in the opposite form.
Same coin.
Mhm.
Completely. That's what and that was my poison, I think, like, yeah.
Yeah,
Always.
yeah. And coming into a room where you didn't have that and you had to actually go in and feel the alignment. I'd had this experience one time when I was at a summer school in England and I was doing ballet and we were in a room that didn't have mirrors. And I was like, how do you know your alignment when you're in a room without mirrors? And they're like, you have to feel it. And I was like, feel it? What? And so it was actually a very liberating experience for me to go into that kind of environment in yoga because it felt so natural to have to go in and actually feel correct alignment. And then the teacher becomes very relevant because the teacher can help you feel it, right? The teacher can say,
Precisely.
do this, and then you're making those adjustments based on their perception rather than your own constant criticizing or judging of yourself, right?
I didn't know you were a dancer,
That's
Harmony,
good.
but I'm not surprised
Yeah.
now. That's amazing. I didn't know that. Yeah. And you
Yeah.
you are very radiant too, and you have an incredible appearance. I suppose you must be quite aware of how you present yourself because you're used to being in that, or you had that performative background.
Yeah, definitely. There's
Yeah.
certain patterns, I think, when you come from a performance background that are deeply ingrained, let's say.
Still have that
For
body
sure.
dysmorphia and the eating disorders. Like that's all, and you smoke still.
Oh, but I think
Yeah.
I don't smoke still. But if but if you want to go like deeper than that, right? I mean, we all have our own patterns, but how there's like a samskara, you could say, or a unconscious tendency to always judge yourself based on your performance.
Yeah.
Like in
Yeah.
every area of life. When you're a performer, that's kind of the end sum game,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So you
Yeah.
also have that very strong inner critic around your performance. So
Mm-hmm.
there's like
You do. Yeah.
always striving for like excellence. And then also, how do you judge a performance? By how people appreciate you or not,
Right.
right?
Right. The
So
reception. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
looking at
Yeah.
those deeply held patterns is really the yoga, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. And I guess like, yeah, as soon as you just help yourself by removing those distractions, like another thing to mention about the modern yoga scene, which has actually changed since I've entered the arena or, shown up on the scene, is when I started teaching in 2011, which is crazy, right? Like I started practicing in 2010, I started teaching the next year. It doesn't make any sense. It's a
And
little
you were
bit
teaching
embarrassing
hot
even.
yoga then.
Yes,
Teaching
of
Yeah.
hot.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, teaching hot. Anyway, though, truly, there were no music classes. That wasn't a thing.
Oh,
And
yeah,
now,
yeah.
since I've returned, well, anyway, I was in the Ashtanga world in Berlin for 4 years. So that's our little niche, the Ashtanga
Yeah.
Vinyasa world. Um, and then I was teaching in a small little French town. And my ex at the time was using music initially and then moved away from it. So then we didn't teach with music
Yeah.
for all that time. And then coming back here to North America and Montreal, I was kind of, I guess not surprised, but I remain a little bit more than ambivalent, kind of like disappointed probably about how many music classes there are. Like I think it's at least 2/3, if not higher, the percentage
Right.
of classes on the schedule that have music.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this funny thing now because every time I cover a class at this one studio, I just manage the messenger. I'm like, hey, can you take the music away? And she always does it for me, and it's fine because we started working together 10 years ago.
Right.
But you know, students come up to me after class and say, hey, I really liked it without the music. Hey, I really felt like I could concentrate more without the music. And I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm so glad. Like, listen, I'm so old. When I started teaching, we didn't have any music.
Yeah, interesting.
When I started, there was a lot of music. A lot of people were putting on Frufi, tantric, Sikh music in the classes, and that would just be in the background. And when I first did a Mysore class, and that was, I guess, 90s, 97, 98. When I first did a Mysore class, it was like, this is just breathing sound. I think next time I kind of encountered it, I was in Sydney, Australia, and I was assisting Manju, and he put Van Halen.
Oh, we're gonna have to get into this. I need to hear about Manju Joyce from you.
So like Van Halen and then like some Led Zeppelins, like we're just kind of rocking out here in the Meister room. And he'd say, go get
I
me a
forgot he
coffee.
likes to put on music. I
He
forgot that he likes to do
loves
that.
it.
I totally
He
forgot.
does not give a shit, and
No fucks given.
he's so good. And his adjustments are so strong.
I know, and so
it's
quick, like ninja. And you're like 360 degrees he moves around you, He's like a
Yeah,
wrestler.
and
Yeah, like
he's like a little stout wrestler. Growing up, I was, my father is about 5'4", 5'5". He calls himself 5'8", but I'm 5'8", and my chin just rests on his head. And so I just always kind of thought of him as this giant, stout dwarf, big, small.
have you seen his arms?
His
You know what I
arms
mean? Like they finally got a little bit smaller now that he's like 78, but they were huge when I
Manju,
met him at
yeah.
like 72. Yeah.
we're talking about Manju and my dad, but they're the same person. Yeah, my dad's arms are as big as my thigh. They're that big. And it's just like he's a tank. And so, yeah, I had a lot of affection.
You are a little bit shorter in terms of height. Like you've got a nice floating advantage too. Some of the best floaters in the practice I've seen tend to be a little bit shorter.
With the shorter arm, you get more torque and more power.
The physics of it.
Yeah, physics. The longer arm, you really have to get into the bandha if you're going to move the bottom part of the body.
That's right. I'm working harder, right?
And so it's all that curling in of the lower spine, curling in of the lumbar spine, and really compacting the pelvis if you're going to move the body up. But if you're shorter, like say Barry Silver was a guy I looked up to, Barry Silver had shorter arms and they were thick, and he could use his arms to move his body around. And he could do Karnavasana with the arm. Whereas if you look at Sharath, he's not using his arms at all. He's deadlocking the elbow to the shoulder, and then it's all in the pelvis.
Yeah, I mean, he's an amazing floater. I haven't met Sharath yet, but I might get a chance to meet him in October.
Oh, yeah, you should.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a little bit funny because I've done 3 teacher trainings with Manju, and those 2 are a little bit like oil and water, you know?
Yeah, they are.
Or at least coming from Manju, you know?
Yeah.
I had no idea you did 3 teacher trainings with Manju.
Yeah, Manju Joyce was a breath of fresh air because, you know, I had a Ashtanga yoga teacher who was kind of stern and like a little forceful and kind of like that fear God, you know, fire under your ass vibe, which can be cool, you know. I'm not super keen on it, but anyway, meeting Manju, right? And then he was just like blowing up the scene and being so irreverent and hilarious that I was like, you can be like this in practice, Ashtanga?
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is my guy, you know? So then I kind of followed him for a few years and
he's
learned
got
his
that
tricks.
left-handed path thing going on, which is to, like,
big time
to blow up normative behaviors of society with yoga. And just all of your fixed ideas of what should and shouldn't be are meaningless in the face of Prakriti and Purusha. Like, it's why are you, you know,
why do you care about it?
Why do you care?
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you a great story. Okay, so
Please.
the first time I was with Manju, I was, you know, I've been doing hot yoga for some years, maybe like 4, something 5, something like that, taking power flows, you know, trying to like mess around, probably slowly damaging myself everywhere. And, you know, because I'm fairly flexible, but like what you mentioned with the, you know, bandhas and the plutahi and the pelvis and the compactness, that's what I'm actually needing to work on. Like that's the thing that doesn't come so naturally to me. I'm like kind of hyperpronic, you know, so more apana would be good. And I was in that spirit of raw experimentation and just getting really excited about Ashtanga Vinyasa and seeing all these poses that didn't exist in any other yoga tradition that I'd come across. Although I'd love to see the consistency in light on yoga, because light on yoga was the first major exposure I had to yoga asanas, and I was like obsessed with it. You know, I have multiple copies of it. I got it on my phone. I reference it all the time.
Wow.
I love hearing about that that period in Iyengar's development and anything. But anywho, so I was with Manju. We're in Mysore, and I'm like, yeah, I'm hot shit. I'm gonna do advanced, right? You know, like. And this is the perversion or the corruption of YouTube, right? Like me coming into yoga 2010s, stuff was actually starting to get uploaded, right? So I'd seen that like 1989 video of Richard and the rest of them practicing advanced with Patabi, that nasty one, you know? So I kind of knew what the sequence was a little bit, you know? And I was like, okay, cool, just sun salutes and you fucking do it, you know? And Manju's like, no, you do some standing poses, okay? I guess you knew better. And then I jumped into it and I'm in Virinchasana A. That's the one where you got the lotus and the ekapada or whatever, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I have no business being in that pose. You know what I mean? I don't even think, you know, I had a decent ekapada at that point, right? Ekapada Shasana. I mean, so he comes up to me, you know, I'm just like trembling and, you know, barely breathing, you know, barely balancing. And he comes up to me and he gets down and he goes, and what makes you happy about that?
That's awesome.
fantastic.
Yeah, I got humbled. I got humbled in that moment, got whacked with the stick.
It's
Yum.
That's a really interesting story. It's really cool to hear because my impressions of Manju is he kind of lets students do whatever they want. And if they want more, he's kind of like, yeah, sure, do what you want, do what you want, do what you want. But it's interesting because I think there is sort of this, what do you say, like a paradox or like a something in his approach where at some point I think
A
he
method to
understands.
his madness.
Yeah, like a method to his madness, or like, what do you do that when you say the opposite of what you want someone to do?
Devil's advocate. Oh, no, it's reverse psychology.
Yeah, like a reverse psychology. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right.
Yeah, where he's like really trying to get you to understand why you're doing the thing you're doing. And so I find it really interesting to hear that story because he's like really getting to the essence of the heart of yoga is like, well, what makes you happy about doing this posture? Like, what is it about this posture? Like, what are you getting out of it in a way, right?
And I have to say something too. Like you're right, and I've practiced and learned from so many Ashtanga teachers, like lots of your colleagues and friends. And
Yeah.
Manju doesn't always have the best reputation, and that that was a little bit weird for me as I like went out into the world and made
Yeah.
more connections. But
That's all about
you know,
tribalism.
Yeah.
yeah, and I'll just push back a little bit because he told us a story about when he was teaching in California and a dancer who came to him. And the dancer was really capable and could do primary, intermediate. It's like the Richard Freeman story, primary first
Gary
day, intermediate the
Lapadota.
second. Oh, really?
Was it Gary Lapadota?
It's Gary Lapadota.
I don't. Okay, well, let's see where it goes because you'll probably
Okay.
be able to confirm it in a moment. But he asked Manju to do a dance, and Manju said no. Like I'm not going to teach it to you. Like you just started. So that was interesting because you're right. Like the number one criticism I've heard about Manju is that he's not preparing his students by allowing them to like blaze
Right.
down the trail without the kind of foundational ability, let's say, to
Yeah.
tackle some of that stuff. But he said no in this case. And then, tragically, the guy went home and found a video on YouTube. It really does corrupt. And also
it's not
educates.
Gary Lapadota then if YouTube
Yeah,
existed. Never mind.
That's an old.
Okay, well, perhaps it wasn't YouTube, but what I heard was that this practitioner, rebuked by Manju.
There was a period in time before YouTube, Sam. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. It was called iFilm. Okay, I was on it.
Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay, no, but anyway, I'll finish it. I'm just blathering here. But students advanced alone in their apartment and ended up having a very bad spinal injury. And so this is like a cautionary tale,
Yeah.
And I guess he was telling us like, right, like it's funny, like he does seem to, like you said, harmony, and perhaps there is some strategy there truly, to let people just do what they want. And I really appreciate that because he is, speaking of tribalism, Russell, like he kind of is the other end of the spectrum, right? Like, hey, have fun, go for it. You want to try that pose? Go for it, have fun.
Yeah.
So there's something obviously really liberating about that. But then, yeah, of course, it's a double-edged sword because you have to be careful with some of these things. And, it's just slow and steady that you can approach this stuff, not all at once.
One little sidebar I want to throw out there, just to kind of blow up people's sacred cows, is I was in Taiwan and I was kind of doing a lot of research on the history and context of Ashtanga Yoga. And in Taipei, yeah, on the internet, but I came across the Contortionist's Handbook from the early 20th century.
Here we go.
And I was kind of looking through it, and the modern postural yoga text had referred to it, and I went and looked for it and found a PDF of it that someone had uploaded online. And it's a circus manual. It's how to become a circus contortionist and how to do it. And they recommend some really interesting things, like always be stretching, always have a one-pointed awareness. Your breathing has to be kind of loud and powerful. And then they do all the photos of the different postures that you do. And they describe how if you do this correctly, then you can do this contortionist into an advanced age, into your 60s, and still be working in the circus. And what Mark Singleton did is he showed the pictures of that handbook.
Is this Yoga Body or the other one?
Yeah, maybe it was Yoga Body. Might have
Okay.
been postural yoga. He did pictures of the contortionist handbook with the light on yoga, side by side, page by page, and they're exact copies. So Iyengar had got a book deal in the 50s and said, "Oh, I need to make a book." And he had found the contortionist handbook and he'd copied it page for page with photos of himself doing the same postures, and then sold that book as Light on Yoga. And then when he shared that book with his teacher, Krishnamacharya, of course, he was furious. One, because his student had got a book deal and he hadn't. And two, and it was nothing like what he had taught him in the Ashtanga Yoga practice in Mysore.
Well, I don't think you're completely correct, but
Go on.
I do want to blow up some sacred cows too. No, thing about light on yoga. Now that you bring it up, and I do remember reading Yoga Body, and I do remember being, confounded by this information. Right, like what's going on? How far does this go back? Where is it coming from? Who influenced who? I think all that stuff is really compelling. To push back a little bit on what Iyengar had learned from his guru, from his brother-in-law, Krishnamacharya, one thing by his own admission, and this is really interesting because we owe so much to Iyengar in the sense of postural alignment and really like being precise, like
I'll push back on the we part, but go ahead.
No.
get in there. I'm sorry, no, I'm the weird one though, because
It's true though. Yoga in the 21st century owes pretty much alignment to Iyengar's emphasis.
Exactly. Let's say that much at least. And all of us, I mean, he was the original yoga mercenary, so we all share that in common with him too. I think
Yeah.
that's fair to say. but most prominent, most like global superstar one, let's say. But by his own admission, when he started to let's say, I'll put quotations here, heavy ones for you, Russell, perfect his asanas, he was really thinking about it. And this comes back to art and photography in terms of how it would be presented in a photograph.
Yeah.
And he was thinking about how an asana needed to be executed so that the photograph would perfectly show the form. So in a weird way, and I love the man, and I actually had an exchange with him before he passed away. So that was a huge moment for me. But I think, he kind of imposed an aesthetic on the body. And as there's lots of criticisms we can make about Iyengar yoga in terms of that kind of stuff, right? Like sort of fitting a square peg into a round hole or something. So I do feel like he learned those asanas, because he spent about 2 years practicing intensely with Krishnamacharya and being beaten by him apparently and everything. But yeah, you're right. I had heard that. I remember he also wrote about the time that he showed it to Krishnamacharya, and Krishnamacharya was like, "What is this?" Because he had changed, quite significantly some of these alignment details. However, I can't say anything against the man.
The film that they all did together, with Krishnamacharya and Iyengar, that film, I mean, it's so interesting to watch it and see, say advanced A sequences that they're doing them together in that film. And it's like you can really see the kind of origin of our forms in that film.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The newsreel footage you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that black and white one.
The black and white film from 1936, yeah.
And there's also a yogini featured in some of that
footage.
Yeah. Who is Iyengar's sister, Krishnamacharya's wife.
Yeah, and the little girls doing the back
Oh yeah,
dance.
that's so incredible. That acro yoga stuff he's doing with this. So Shubha, my teacher last night, that she's one of those little girls.
That's amazing.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah. Mind-blowing, right?
That's nice.
I can't believe that, it's kind of like when I met Manju and nobody ever talked about him. I was like, what the hell? There's a son of Patabi Joyce who's still alive? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess, I don't even know if I'd heard of Saraswati at that point, but it was sort of like, it's wild that these heavy hitters are actually kind of in the shadows,
Yeah, it's
the thing about tribes is they're closed circles.
Yeah, tribes are closed circles. It's interesting to hear your experience, I think for Russell and I, because we were kind of in the Ashtanga community from circle from like also a young age, a young time in our yoga. Yeah, cult, exactly. From a young age, a young time in our practice. And then also going to Mysore in the early days, Saraswati, she had started teaching by that time with Patabi Joyce and
2003
and Sharat, and they were all in the room together teaching. So she was always
the three of them all together.
Three together.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she was always kind of a figure for our generation of students at that time that started in the new middle era, Shala.
New middle era.
Middle era, I like it. That's the era.
Yeah. And also by that time, Manju and Patabi Joyce were, I think, on fairly good terms. And he would come and visit. And sometimes you'd be in the room and it'd be Saraswati, Manju, Sharat, and Patabi Joyce all teaching together in the same room.
Quelle chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, on a rare Manju visit.
Yeah.
So I feel that even though he was a bit of a rebel and an outlier, he always
shit talker.
Yeah, but he always I don't know, I always felt a lot of respect for him and felt very much his legitimacy in the practice.
I guess he kind of sidestepped it, right? Because that was the thing. I think like it could have been passed to him, but on that first tour in the US, when he got to California, I think he never went back. Like that's just what happened.
He said to me, it's because why would anyone want to live with their parents when you could live in California?
Guy keeps it real,
Yeah.
I asked him, this must have been like 2008. He was here teaching teaching Mysore and some workshop sessions and things. And I was his tour guide of the city at the time. And I said to him, Manju, do you think you'll ever go back to India? And he's like, no. He said, maybe Goa, but no.
Not to live.
Not to live.
No.
Yeah. I guess he's just kind of happy, like he got out of there and like, yeah.
I mean, he's living the dream in a way, right? I mean, for him,
California, touring Europe half the year, all year.
Yeah, it wasn't in a funny way, like, I don't know. It's interesting because there's a sense of, he comes from this very rich cultural tradition, but he wanted to be free and experience what the West has. And I think so many Westerners, we come from this great freedom and so much choice and so much opportunity. And yet there's sort of this tendency for us to want to almost like go back in time and become sort of insular in our approach to things, or
orthodoxy.
Yeah, yearning for an orthodoxy and a discipline and a one way, like this is the correct way.
That's really insightful. I totally feel the same way.
I'm wondering if I could, you mentioned photography earlier, and I take issue with photography. And I've talked about this in our workshop. I loathe artistic photography. On the one, I'm a painter.
You use photography as source material for your paintings. Do you not?
True. He does.
Oh, I certainly do. Yeah, but I amplify it in a painting. So, it's lovely painting of Harmony right behind me at her grandmother's house.
I believe it. Painter, everybody. I was so surprised when I saw his Instagram account. I had no idea.
This one? Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that I felt that I learned from Richard was this notion that, and I want to ask you about your relationship to Richard, is that the yoga posture isn't a fixed thing. It's something that as the breath informs the body in a pranic or aponic pattern, then the body moves in relationship to it and needs to be then countered with the opposite pattern. You do a pranic movement, then you need to ground it with apana. And so look at these hearts that he's making with the screen. That's phenomenal. Only a fucking millennial could do that. And so the problem with Iyengar is that he is so hyper-focused on photography, on making a fixed thing that then goes on the cover of Yoga Journal. And you don't have any kind of awareness of Tristana. It's just all the way the fucking thing looks. And so the whole thing needs to be exploded, is my point of view. So let's go back to you. And maybe there's
Issue there, though.
the
I think you're opening up a can of whoop ass.
yeah, there's open. And with that context, tell us about your relationship to Richard.
Thank you for asking. So Mr. Iyengar was my first yogic obsession.
Mm.
And I chased it to the extent that I wrote to him and he wrote me back. And that was the exchange we had before he
Oh.
passed away. Yeah. So that was really wild. I was reading Light on Life, and I was feeling very moved by that book. And I just kind of love how zealous he was, and like his kind of like lust for life.
What did you write to him?
Oh, I was trying to get a ticket. I was trying to get a golden ticket to the Shala, Can is there any way, Mr. Iyengar, please, Guruji, can I skip the line of students who've been practicing diligently for years, waiting for their chance, and can you just let me come in,
Amazing.
Pretty
What did he say?
Pretty ridiculous.
He said no? He said, I love you, but no.
I'll tell you what I remember. Like, it was brief and it was really kind of mystical and cool, So what he said was, he was so kind, actually. He just explained that, like what I was already aware of through speaking to people and hearing from the grapevine that, you apply, you get a recommendation, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So a friend of mine had actually made it there. And I think he just made a donation at the front door. And that actually worked, So
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of like, maybe I can fandangle.
Baksheesh, really? Working in India? My goodness.
So he just explained, that there's a system. And then he kind of he got personal. He just said, I am running 96 years old. I think that's what he said.
Okay.
And I loved his sort of English, And I do not know how long God will keep me on this earth planet. So therefore, I do not want to make any promises to anyone, so that I'm free from all obligations.
Wow.
So it was kind of incredible. Like, he didn't just
Yeah.
dismiss me. He said, hey, like, there's something we're doing. And furthermore, I don't even know how much longer I'm going to be on the stage,
Yeah.
Yeah. He died shortly after that too, actually.
He did, yeah. And one thing that was kind of funny that you both might relate to as North Americans and coming up a little bit with that, like, Star Wars history, was he did mention that he might be able, because I had requested teaching from him, I wanted to learn. And
Right.
he said that he might be able to guide from a corner as he is no longer teaching. Of course, I don't think he could help himself, and he was still teaching until the last breath he breathed,
Yeah.
probably.
Mhm.
But I thought of like that thing when the Jedis die and they come back as like blue holograms, off on the
I
periphery.
can do that
I
for
kind of felt
you.
like
Yeah.
maybe if I
Mhm.
went there, even if he's gone, he'll be in the corner, like yelling at me.
Totally. 100%. I met him in 2000 and gosh, I don't know, 6 or maybe 7. And we just went to Pune and went to his shala there and just
Wow.
asked if we could like look around, and we took a tour. And he was just roaming around, right? Because it's his place. So why not? So we
The Lion of Pune, right?
yeah. So he would like, there's students practicing in his room, and he would just kind of go in and like, tell people what to fix or like say things to people and then like wander out. And he was down in the library and I got a book signed by him. We had a little conversation, and he followed him up a staircase, and he like called out one student and said, "Oh, so and so," and asked her a question. And we were just like following him around, like whatever he was doing. We were just sort of like, oh, let's just hang out with Iyengar for a few hours, see what happens.
Wow, Harmony. Wow.
Yeah, it was cool. It was neat to see him in his like element and really, yeah, really fierce. He has such a fire, such a fierce energy. And it's beautiful that he wrote you that letter, because that's very personal, very, very
Yeah.
touching that he took that time actually.
Where's the letter
I
now?
know.
Yeah.
It's saved on the Gmail inbox. Yeah.
Oh, okay, you should
That's
print it.
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. I
Print it
did
and
at one
frame
point.
it.
I had it up on my wall. It was like, yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, so then, from Iyengar, I kind of went to some Iyengar studios and was reading things. And then somewhere, YouTube era, I see that Yoga Works video, right? And I'm watching the 6 of them with Patabi. And I'm like, who the fuck is Richard Freeman?
Yeah, he was
'Cause
special. In that room, he was special.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Apparently, Eddie Stern told a story when he was in Russia a few years ago. I watched this video that because they filmed all three series on the same day, I think.
Yeah, and the
So
third one was unfortunately corrupted.
never released.
Yeah, the video was
But
all shot to hell and problem.
also heard that like Richard said that people were falling out of poses and not able to do it at that point, which go figure after a full day of primary and intermediate, plus like stopping every half hour to put in a new tape.
Mhm.
But
Right.
that was so funny. So the way he was moving, was just like, what the hell? Like, what the
Mhm.
hell?
Yeah.
And Eddie Stern told a story about that video. Manju also told me about that recording because apparently he was hanging around, or maybe he just is aware of it because, his father was in town, right?
Yeah, probably.
California. So apparently Patabi said at the end of the recording that day, all students, no hope, only Richard.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, like to be a snob, but like, yeah, the quality of his movement was just so refined and so
Yeah.
fluid and so cat-like and agile. It was just like, what the hell? I mean, yeah. So that was just kind of this instant attraction.
Hmm.
And then at the time, the hot yoga studio where I was practicing and teaching, they had actually the DVD box set, right? So now
Yeah.
you had like Introduction to Yoga, which I never watched for years, like just take me to the real deal, right? Primary series of Richard Freeman and the intermediate series of Richard Freeman, the one that came out like 10 years later, they
Mhm.
filmed in the yoga workshop, right? So you can actually still see the beautiful space there. I got to practice in the yoga workshop a few times before it's gone because now it's been bought by developers and it's a different thing. But yeah, so then that began the kind of obsession with Richard. Like
Mm.
my focus shifted there from Mr. Iyengar to Richard. Tried to read the Mirror of Yoga. That one went right over my head. I couldn't keep up with his, meandering writing style. So it works kind of better, I think, in live person.
Did you
Like,
ever listen to the Yoga Matrix?
well, I'm glad you should say that because, like, so what happened was I started getting obsessed with him. And I have this yoga friend who ends up being the one, my good friend, JK, who ended up introducing me to Manju because he had been going to Halifax every spring to learn from Manju because Manju used to be coming to Nova Scotia to teach there with this woman, a yoga teacher, Jodie Manley. And so we went out there a few times. But anyway, he saw my budding obsession with Richard and he said, "Hey man, like you gotta listen to the Yoga Matrix." And I'm like, what
Yeah.
the hell is the Yoga Matrix, Because all I'd seen was like little random YouTube videos with little interviews with him or something on some of his tours. And then of course those two Yoga Works videos, which I used to
Yeah.
watch like every night, like obsessively, try to understand, memorizing the sequences and whatnot. So then I meet my friend in a cafe, and this is so great, Russell. You'll probably remember this. And he takes out his backpack and he pulls out the fucking LP, right? Because when it was originally produced, it was produced like a vinyl record, gatefold,
Yeah.
right? And it had
Yeah.
the 6 CDs. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Six
it came
CDs.
out with cassettes first, friend.
God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
probably at the
Yeah.
same time because that was 2002. So I bet it came out
Maybe,
in
yeah,
both
maybe
formats at
the
the same.
same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Wow, cassette. You had the cassettes?
I had
My God.
cassettes, I had CDs, and then I think I have the electronic
Download on
version
Audible
also.
or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds true.
Everyone would have their little yoga matrix in their, in their backpack.
Yeah, I realized that it was like a favorite for the people that knew it. It was like this, funny thing. Darby used to joke that if he wanted to go to sleep, he'd put on the Yoga Matrix.
It's
I think there was a
true.
little jealousy there, but yeah.
But there's something about Richard's voice, especially, I don't know, in that. No, it's just his voice, actually, that when you listen to it for long periods of time, I think because he's so like vaguely toned, like he's so
Yeah, he's constantly from his diaphragm.
yeah, that you
All little things.
relax. You relax so deeply into your parasympathetic nervous
It's
system that
really-
you start to fall asleep.
It's a real thing. And you sit next to him,
It's true.
your vagal nerve is stimulated.
Mary told me a great story about the Yoga Matrix in October because I was talking to her about that. And Mary Taylor, Richard's wife, also a fabulous yoga teacher and wonderful human. So she told me about when they recorded that because I went up to her, I'm like, "Hey, be honest with me. Like, Yoga Matrix is your idea. Like, don't lie to me, you know? And she's like, no, it was Richard. I'm like, come on, Mary. And she's like, okay, yeah. I mean, I helped him organize his thoughts. I gave him like a little, plan of how he might like talk about the things he wanted to talk about. And I was like, I fucking
Hmm.
knew it. And,
Yeah.
every great man, right? Right.
That's right.
Um, so then she told me about when they went in to start the recording, like in the sound booth, and it was all, the great audio quality, right? Like
Hmm.
Yeah.
good high fidelity. So they were in the sound booth, Mary and the woman, I forget her name now, who started Sounds True.
Mhm.
She's still
Yeah.
doing stuff as well. She's teaching and she's a really successful businesswoman, and Sounds True is a wonderful publishing house and has all sorts of cool stuff. And they've evolved. They've really stayed in step with the times. But anyway, like, so I think she's very proactive and productive, let's say, so she's like, get things done. And Mary and her are sitting in the sound booth watching Richard in the recording booth. And he just like is sitting there, and he just kind of closes his eyes. And then like minutes elapse, and like the woman is like, Mary, what's wrong with him? Like, is he going to start talking? Like, we're recording, like it's time to do the thing now, And like apparently Richard just stretched out this enormous amount of silence, like this enormous amount of time
Hmm.
before finally, yoga begins with listening. And so it was kind of a funny moment because
Wow.
apparently, she was kind of like, come on, when is this guy going to start talking? And then he finally did. And it was, quite pregnant with all the Richard, philosophizing,
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's amazing. I never forget because I used to listen to that all the time, like from
Totally.
early,
Me too.
early in my yoga journey. And then I was listening to it on my little iPod. I would listen to it like on long bus rides, and so I would often fall asleep to it.
Yeah, I
And,
definitely fell asleep to it too.
but of course I'd listened to it many, many times. So it was, a thing. And the first time I met Richard and Mary in person was in Mysore in 2004. They were there for Pattabhi Joyce's birthday with their son Gabriel, and we were at the Southern Star. And we started chatting with them, and they're like, "Oh, come have some coffee, sit with us." So we were sitting with them, and Richard's like talking. I asked him a question. He's talking and talking, and I've been up since like 2 a.m. and done like a whole yoga practice, and now I'm at the Southern
Wow.
Star eating breakfast, and I'm like, oh no, it's the voice. I'm like literally there with him in person, like this person I put way up on a pedestal as like
He's putting you right to sleep.
and he's putting me right to sleep at the table in front of him.
He's doing what he does. Yeah.
And I'm like trying to like keep my eyes open, and I'm like drinking more coffee. I'm like doing everything I can to stay awake.
This is my favorite sleepy time.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny. I have to say one thing too about another student of Richard's, my dear friend Ty Landrum, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's interesting, right? Because like Ty has such an intense practice style, and of course, looking at Richard's practice style when he was a younger man, like you can see there's a lot of vigor, and he really loved it, right?
Mhm.
But it's interesting that like on the other end, when they sit down and open their mouth and start talking and just relating on that, that like dialogue or conversational level, both of them are quite calm. It's kind of, I wonder if there's like some relationship there, right? That like the
Fatigue.
more you kind of throw yourself, yeah, that's what it is. Deep fatigue. Let's be honest.
Yeah. One time I saw Richard get a little uptight, and it was in Taipei actually. A student had said that she wanted to do Marichiasana C a particular way with her foot in a particular way, and she pushed back on the way that he suggested that she do it. And he said, well, I
Hmm.
thought it was supposed to be this way. And I saw his voice tighten. And
Mm,
I think he was just, maybe it was end of a very long day, and
yeah.
he wasn't centered in that moment, and his voice tightened
Hmm.
and became higher in a pitch. And then I heard it for just a half second,
Yeah.
and then I saw him recenter and bring it back down. It's like,
Yeah.
why would you do that? And I was like, oh, this is a constant practice for him to recenter and bring his voice back down. And he's constantly bringing it there with his practices, constantly to bring it back down. And then it becomes rich and sonorous. And then you can ride that. But if you allow yourself to kind of get into something a bit too much,
Yeah.
then the whole pitch and timbre changes. And so it's almost like his anxiety is such a beast that he has to make sure to recenter himself to keep it from exploding on him.
Yeah, my mother met him in Vienna. Yeah, she came to pick me up when I was there studying with them in 2018. They were there for like a 4-day thing. Beautiful venue. It's like an old, opera hall or something like that. Unbelievable. Yeah, so nice. I actually took photographs, curse me, on a medium format Yashica 960 twin lens. I've got some great photos from analog, film
Great photos, whatever that sounds like a
Is that an
oxymoron?
oxymoron?
It's an oxymoron.
No, I love
And,
photography.
just to your point a little bit about this constant practice he's engaging in, which is funny, right? Because one of his adages is, practice yoga all day long, every day.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not talking about asana. They're talking about exactly that, like coming into your center, right? Like staying out of your ego, right? Like coming back to the observer, to the witness, to the seer. So it really is the practice of yoga all day long.
Of course. Yeah, exactly. Which is also kind of a revelation at some point, because in the beginning, maybe we were a little bit lost. But when we walked away, to go get some lunch, I said, "So what did you think? This is my teacher. I love this guy, da 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 da." And she'd done a few yoga glow classes with him, actually. So she sort of, had been introduced to him virtually. And she said, "Well, he's very present." Like that was the thing that she had to say about this brief little encounter. But maybe, like you said, just observing this like nanosecond where he split, but then, reeled it back in. Yeah, I feel like his presence is pretty amazing. Yeah, like yeah, and so like I just love him. Yeah, I met him in 2015 in Chicago. Then I did the teachers intensive in 2016. I applied 3 times. I was only accepted after I met him. Which is probably
beautiful.
a good thing anyway, because I wasn't ready before.
Yeah.
It was really beautiful. And then the advanced intensive in 2017. And then, Vienna 2018, Berlin 2019, and then again, Boulder 2023. It had been a little while. But, online, if I can catch them doing stuff like you did the teachers intensive online, right? In 2020, I think.
Yeah.
I had some friends who were taking that with you.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was a really small group, but it was beautiful.
Watching those old dogs learn some new tricks, in front of the camera and with the Zoom and, the microphone.
Yeah, it was beautiful too. Bob Thurman was also teaching. Yeah.
That's cool. I've always wanted to meet him.
I'd studied with
Or that
Bob.
might have been a different retreat I did with them and Bob, but it was around the same time. I forget. But it was amazing. It was lovely.
I studied with Bob at the Tibet House in New York. We did the Diamond Sutra, and I just found him like just the most incredibly compelling figure, as just like his practice, unlike his voice with Richard, like Richard's voice is his practice, his yoga practice. Bob's yoga practice is the constant self-deprecation. And you have the constant reminder that you're a small little tadpole in a pond, and you've got one eye, you're not enlightened, and you haven't become the Buddha, and this is what you get. And it's like and you can say that in a high squeaky voice, and you can still be a yogi at that point. And this is a phenomenal dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd really like his granddaughter, by the way. I'd like to meet her.
It's his daughter.
You mean his daughter?
I mean Uma Thurman's daughter.
Oh, Uma Thurman's daughter.
I didn't even know about Uma Thurman.
She's fun.
Yeah, Uma Thurman.
She was in Stranger Things.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's Ethan Hawke's daughter in Stranger Things. She was the girl at the ice cream.
Oh yeah! Oh my God, I can see
that's
right. And wow, so wild. Cool. She was great.
Yeah,
I only
she's
watched the
cool.
fourth season. I got
She's a
on
hell of a
late.
singer as well. She'll come up on my
Spotify.
Sirius XM. It's like,
Okay.
what? It's like, oh yeah, here we go.
Cool.
Maya Hawk. Maya
My
named
Hawk,
after
that's right.
some Buddhist term, you know.
Solid.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of fun stories, and this has been fabulous. But we want to plug. We should have you back on the show to talk about
I'd be honored.
I really want to know more about your mom. But maybe you could tell us what you're doing at Purple Valley and when you're going to
Yeah.
be there and what that's going to be like. We met you at Purple Valley. You were just a young pup, but now you're going to run the show.
You guys made me famous. You know, you put me on YouTube. I was on the thumbnail there with you, Harmony,
That's
right? From Soup to
right.
Parang Gustasana, you know?
Yeah. People can still see that class and practice full primary. Every once in a while, I get a message from someone that they're practicing full primary with me in Purple Valley on YouTube.
It's a great full circle moment. Like, thank you, Russell, to bring it back to that. Like, I met you both there in 2019. That was my first time there, and I was assisting Ty. And I came back the next season in 2020,
Yeah.
just
Assisting
before
Ty again, right?
assisting Ty again.
Yeah.
And actually, the current program director was a student that second time,
Oh, cool.
Christoph. So we stayed in touch. And a few months ago, he asked me if I'd be interested in coming and running a program during the monsoon season in July. And he said that it went well last year. And I mean, of course, I was just kind of beside myself because I always wanted that in a way. Like when I was there, I'm like, this place is beautiful. I love that chala. You know what I mean? Like it's such an oasis. Go, it's kind of a crazy place, but Purple Valley really is a little oasis.
Yeah.
So when he offered that to me, I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what I'll be doing this summer for 1 month.
For one
Yeah,
full month in July?
June?
One
Is it
full
July?
month, 6 days a week. Let's see if I make it.
It'll be great. You know,
Yeah.
Have you hired assistants?
he
So
probably
I
won't.
think I
You
have
probably
found
won't need
one.
them.
It depends on the numbers, but I've spoke to a friend who's also worked with Richard and Mary a fair bit, and so I think it would be a
Nice.
great fit. And yeah.
That'll be so fun. You know, I didn't start, but my first kind of foray into Purple Valley was 2008 to 2009 season, and I was a resident manager there. So I was,
Whoa.
yeah, I was like I was like a teacher manager in a way. So I was,
They needed some extra help.
yeah, I ran 5 retreats, I think, that season, and then also was helping to manage the teachers. So like if someone fell sick, which often people do, they had a sub. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if they were late, like David Swenson couldn't get there on time, he had some flight delays, something happened.
One dog.
Yeah, they had a sub. So that was kind of what I was doing, and it was beautiful. It was really a beautiful place to live and to teach from, and you're in India.
And meeting so many teachers like you did, right? You must have
Yeah,
met
that
like
was
5 or 10 or
very
whatever.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I met Chuck and Marty for the first time, and Nancy Gilgoff, Dina Kingsburg.
Purple Valley has that YouTube channel that most people probably know about, and there's an incredible interview with Maddie Israeli. That's like 50 minutes or something. And it's a really cool because she also talks a little bit about the Iyengar world, the Ashtanga Vinyasa world, and it's a really good. It really helped me parse things out when I was trying to make sense of all of this tribalism, as you put it.
She was like, as far as, you know, you explaining how Manju adjusts like 360 in, you know, under 5 seconds, and he's adjusted everything. That was also how Mahdi adjusts, but with props, you know, you're like in a posture and like in under 60 seconds,
which is weird in our world, right? The props are
Yeah.
weird, right? Like in the David Gareeds and the props are weird, Chris. It's very cool when you find the teachers who are like crazy with the props.
Yeah, the Ashtangar teachers.
I think there is like a YouTube channel for Japanese bondage. And we'd like to do it really quick. I'm going to look it up for you. We'll put it
he's making a joke,
in
but
the
he's not far
show.
off. I watch students in the Mysore room sometimes wrap themselves up. I'm like, what are you doing? You know, don't you want to just touch your own skin? This is a little bit weird.
You put on plastic gloves to do like your asana.
Well, I mean, it's like some kind of origami. I don't know what they're
Black
doing.
polyurethane is my preference. Yeah.
Well, it's been so fun to connect with you, Sam. Thank you for coming on.
Dude,
And
It's
if
so
people
weird.
are looking for an India adventure in July,
Harmony and I asked you to be on the show simultaneously on different Instagram channels, not
it was a
realizing that
coordinated attack.
we did not realize that we had both asked you at the same time. And I
Wow.
was like, suddenly I saw that Sam was on the docket. We're going to interview him. I was like, oh, cool. You two got in touch. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I was the one who invited him. I was like, you really went for it. Like, then I'm like, no, I invited him. Like, no, you didn't.
I walked upstairs and then Russell was like, oh, I see you invited Sam to come on the podcast. And I just invited him and told him to get in touch with you. And I was like, I was just talking with you. I'm like, you were talking to him?
Yeah.
Why were you talking to him?
I
was
wanted the
talking to him.
Sam on the show. That's why I was talking to Sam.
So we were fighting over you.
Once again, I'm blushing.
Well,
All right.
don't go climbing too many buildings or doing any kind of like parkour tricks from street lamps or anything over there, Spider-Man.
No, I'll try to avoid that. Yeah.
And before you go to Goa, how long are you in Montreal? If people are in Montreal and they want to come practice with you.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I'm covering the Mysore program, so I'm in Montreal until July, basically. So if you are in town,
Yeah.
the name of the studio is Ashtanga Yoga Montreal, and then the program is actually called Mysore Montreal. But that's a little bit confusing. But anyway, easy to find. It's got
Make
good
the
SEO.
trip.
Google Ashtanga Montreal. Yeah, come out here and let's do some work.
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
Thank you,
both.
Sam.
It was a real pleasure. Thanks. Big highlight.
If you would like to work more intimately with me in a deeper way, then I would invite you to sign up for this 4-day retreat I'm teaching at Nåsen Mountain Lodge in Norway. I will be teaching there May 30th to June 3rd. It's a retreat called Unlayering, using yoga as a tool for spiritual wellness to increase your energy and fulfillment. And we're going to use all of the somatic practices we have to help release and let go of the patterns, the thoughts and the beliefs, and maybe even the habits that are no longer serving you as a practitioner, and step into a whole new way of embodying yoga within your life. So this is a really beautiful time of connecting and exploring nature in a setting where you can go within and find silence and stillness and solitude, but then also really revitalize your inner well-being, your energy, to step into a whole new chapter in your life. I'm excited for this retreat. It's all inclusive. You can find the link in the show notes, and I hope you'll join me May 30th to June 3rd at Nåsen Retreat Center. I look forward to meeting you there. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.